All right. Well, welcome to the September 26, 2024 Social Equity Working Group meeting. I just wanted to go ahead and call today's meeting to order at 9:35 a.m. Clerk, can you confirm we have quorum?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do have a quorum with 7 of 12 members present.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I would like to ask today's interpreter to introduce themselves and walk through how to access our interpretation services for today's meeting.
Good morning. Announcement from interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, World, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish logo in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from Indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. And now I'm going to go ahead and review the meeting process for both the working group members as well as the members of the public who wish to participate. For working group members, when you would like to speak, please raise your hand and I will call you by your name. And then in front of you are iPads where you will find today's agenda and supporting materials by clicking on the arrow on the top left. Please note that you can zoom in and out using the iPad touchscreen. And now I'll turn to our clerk to see if we can provide a quick reminder on how the public comments are going to work.
Thank you, Chair. For those in person here and present, if you would like to speak on an item, please complete a request to comment slip. And at this point, you can just bring it directly to me. And then those virtual, raise your hand before the end of the presentation of an item or as soon as the chair calls. I will call on those in person first and then virtual. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you. Yes.
Clerk, my apologies. Can we request that we have 2 minutes for public comment?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. All right. And I think that's moving us right along. So thank you. And do any members of the working group have any questions on the meeting procedures before we go ahead and continue? Okay, great. All right, so we'll go ahead and start with item number 1, which is member and public comments. So are there any public comments for this item?
Thank you. I currently have 3 public commenters, 2 in person and 1 virtual. Purita Javier, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Cesar Javier.
Good morning. I am Purita Javier, victim of ceramic cone toxicity in the residential zone designated neighborhood. City Treasury Office approved the application for business tax permit of Mr. Donald Fraser's primary business type, non-metallic mineral product manufacturing and collected a fee of $38 annually on December 17, 1984. This business actually is ceramics manufacturing with kiln industrial operation. His business is not on the list for regulatory permit required of industrial activity. This means he can locate, construct, operate, and sell the product of his own way and discretion. Selling is done through the San Diego Pottery Guild shops at Spanish Village, Balboa Park, and from customers' orders without selling permit from the state. One critical fire survey questionnaire in the application is whether or not the owner handles chemical hazardous materials. Also, on owner's information, he is required.
Ma'am, your time
of
has expired.
professional.
Our next commenter, Cesar Javier, please go ahead.
Cesar Javier, a father of three, taxpayer, community volunteer, self-imposed volunteerism when we formally reported this community issue on toxicity. It was located, constructed, and operated in a residential zone designated community. From your respective cities, please look, confirm if you have one or two. It's ugly in our society. Ceramic scale through repetitive heating of clay mixed with chemicals, the transformation from solid to gas emits, generates, produces toxicity, name it, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitric oxide. It's real. CDC says so. Bulletin 2020, Health Bulletin 2020, right on the pandemic time. Those from other cities, look and see your neighbors. In our case, we are the only one in District 9 that has that kind of industrial activity poisoning the gas we breathe. We come here, we go groupings, meetings, to amplify this because it's bad for the humans and the thing, ecology, the flora and fauna. It is real. Since 2020-21, my city, your city, San Diego, the finest city, has not responded accordingly.
Your time has expired. Thank
It's
you.
ugly.
Our next commenter is virtual, and he'll be the final commenter, Blair Beekman. Please go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks for the meeting today. I haven't attended a SANDAG equity meeting for a while. It's really good to be here. Thank you. Thank you for your committee meeting, for your committee purpose. I've been working on tech accountability for local communities for the past 10 years now. It originally started from, I guess, Congress. I needed, after Edward Snowden issues of, asking what we're doing with our surveillance as a country. Congress went to the UN and asked what can be best practices. With the UN, with the work of the ACLU, developed a set of practices, guidelines, legal examples, legal precedents to help local communities really work and address the issue of what can be tech accountability for our future. What can be openness? What can be clarity? What can be building a participatory process together to leave the era of 9/11 and war? We came up with some really good ideas and choices, and they're coming through 10 years later. I sit here and promote them all the time of what is really possible with these things. Among its many choices, it also works to help address the future of, we can be addressing the UN itself and their practices of accountability. And after 10 years now, the UN, if you notice at the most recent meeting this past week, they're talking about reform. They're talking about how they can rebuild themselves. And I think how we can participate at the local level and ask questions of them. We can be a part of the process. And we're developing participatory democracy right now with tech accountability help. So good luck in the efforts of what you can do and that we can work towards peace. And good luck how we can do it. Thank you to the Javieres as always.
And that concludes public comments.
Thank you. Do any members of the working group have any comments to make before we move on? Yes, go ahead, Claire.
Thank you. I just wanted to recognize our public commenters today, and thank you for raising the issue of environmental justice in our communities, which is what we're talking about here in this group. And so, we're looking at environmental justice from a transit issue, but I also think it's critical that we're looking at things like zoning and, what sort of businesses are coming into our communities and making sure that that's part of our discussion. And then just also the question about accountability. And it makes me think about what does accountability look like, at our jurisdiction levels when we're creating this, big vision for our county. How do we make sure that we're accountable to our local communities as well? So just appreciate the comments.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, not seeing any. All right, so just want to share some updates, and I know Paula has some as well. Last month, SANDAG hosted its first CBO open house to showcase the integral work and partnership we have with our community-based organizations in developing the regional plan. And I want to thank all of you for your participation and continued leadership in our region. And with that, I'll pass it off to Paula really quick.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully everyone did hear, if you weren't here in August, about that open house. We were really happy to have that and hope we can do that some more. I have an update on the regional plan. Staff is going to be taking a report to the Board of Directors meeting that's happening tomorrow. Of course, as always, we encourage you to listen in or attend if you can. Staff is going to be walking through the comparisons of what was proposed in the 2025 initial concept that everybody saw earlier this year compared to the Transnet ordinance. The details on the projects are in the agenda packet. It's attachment 4 on the items that are on the Board of Directors agenda packet. We've also heard some concerns that the plan is expanding highways. We want to reassure folks here that the only expansion plans are for managed lanes. And as a reminder, the managed lanes support carpool, transit, and other measures. So, of course, as always, if you have questions, please listen in or reach back out to us. And we have one additional staff update. So if it's okay with the chair, I'll invite Ali to share that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ali Vasquez. I'm the program manager for the Specialized Transportation Grant Program here at SANDAG. You may be aware we have a number of grant programs here at SANDAG, and the STGP is one of them. The STGP provides funding for projects that improve mobility of older adults and people with disabilities by providing transportation grants. And I wanted to invite or tell you about an opportunity to become an evaluator for our latest cycle of the Specialized Transportation Grant Program. So what that means is we have an open application right now, and we expect those applications to be due in October, and we're looking for evaluators. So if any of you are interested in becoming an evaluator, please let us know. Paula has graciously actually volunteered to send you information about this opportunity after the meeting, but we're looking for evaluators for the Cycle 13 call. And what that entails is you shouldn't have a conflict of interest, meaning like you can't be an applicant yourself for the program. And we would expect the evaluators to read through the applications that we receive, and we may hold 1 to 2 meetings just to debrief as evaluators on the scores of the applications. So if you're interested, please feel free to reach out. I would anticipate that the evaluation process will begin in November, and it will hold it throughout the month of November. And that depending on how many applications receive, the evaluators, it's about 12 to 16 hours dedicated time. So that's about 2 days if you think about it. And it is, the evaluation process does take place in Excel. So I would recommend that basic Excel skills might help an evaluator. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Paula will send out our flyer about this, and please feel free to even tell your colleagues about this opportunity as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We are now going to proceed to approving agenda item 2, which is the June 27th working group meeting minutes. Do working group members have any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. Do we have any comments from the public on the minutes?
Thank you. I have one public commenter, Blair Beekman. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. I just wanted to thank yourselves for acknowledging the Javiers on the previous item. They attend a lot of public meetings in San Diego, and they have a really important point to work towards. And I hope we're at a time when we're really starting to listen to them more, and decisions can start to be better addressed in their issues. And I felt the public meeting minutes was a time to mention their continual work and efforts as part of our regular processes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments. And before we take a motion and a second to vote, I would just like to remind the members that you do not have to have been present at the previous meeting in order to vote on and approve the minutes. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Great, motion by Barry and then second by Carol. Thank you. All those in favor, if you could please raise your hand. Okay, any opposed? Perfect.
And just for the record, any abstentions? Thank you. That motion passes unanimously.
Perfect, thank you. All right. So we're moving on to our next item. And to kick us off, we have Richard Radcliffe and Kat Mattel from SANDAG, who will present an overview of the proposed final 2025 Regional Transportation Improvement Program and the social equity analysis. And with that, I'll pass it on to you all.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members of the Social Equity Working Group. I'm Richard, and I'm here with Kat, and as the Chair mentioned, we're going to provide you with a brief overview and refresher on the proposed final 2025 RTIP and the social equity analysis that was done, and including the methodology and the results. So as a reminder, the RTIP is the short-term funding planning document that implements the first 5 years of the SANDAG regional plan. It gets updated every 2 years and is amended quarterly. The 2025 RTIP covers the 5-year period from fiscal year 2025 through 2029. The RTIP is a listing of major transportation projects in the San Diego region, and it also includes the Transnet Program of Projects, or POP. An air quality conformity analysis is performed on each RTIP, and this is relevant for the projects that are either considered capacity increasing or not capacity increasing. This slide here highlights the similarities and differences between the social equity analysis that was done on the 2021 regional plan and the one that was done on the 2025 RTIP. Some similarities are the utilization of CalEnviro Screen 4.0 to identify disadvantaged communities, as well as the top 50% and 25% scoring, and a half-mile buffer to determine the access to transportation projects. Some differences include with the regional plan measures projected access to the 2050 transportation network, and the RTIP investment analysis is based on project locations. The regional plan gets updated every 4 years, and as I mentioned on the last slide, the RTIP is updated every 2 years. I'll now hand it over to Kat to discuss the social equity analysis methodology and results.
Thank you, Richard. Before I begin, I would like to remind everyone that this is only the second time we've conducted a social equity analysis for the RTIP, and that it is a location-based analysis that does not impact RTIP funding allocations to partner agencies. So this analysis is done after funds have been programmed and promised for allocation to our partner agencies. However, it does provide a current snapshot of where program projects are in relation to vulnerable communities in the San Diego region. Secondly, this analysis could only be performed on projects we were able to map in GIS. The full analysis can be found in Appendix G of the 2025 RTIP. And I will be moving on to the methodology approach. To begin our analysis, we defined vulnerable and most vulnerable communities in the San Diego region through Kaalmada Luqadda 4.0, which I will get into in the next slide. We then geospatially identified each project's unique location and created a half-mile buffer, as Richard hinted at, similarly to the regional plan social equity analysis. We also identified our social equity areas, which for the purpose of this analysis are the top 50% of Kaalmada Luqadda scoring census tracts. Finally, each project was calculated for its overall RTIP social equity investment, which is measured by project dollars in the 5-year programming period. As I mentioned earlier, staff used the statewide Kaalmada Luqadda 4.0 index to define vulnerable and most vulnerable communities, the top 50% of scoring census tracts being vulnerable and the top 25% being the most vulnerable. We found Kaalmada Luqadda to be the most comprehensive tool to identify disadvantaged communities in our region, given the varying factors that go into a community's vulnerability. Each score is made up of 2 component categories, pollution burden and population characteristics. Both categories are weighed with the same weight with a maximum score of 10 and multiplied together to find a composite score. Each score falls in a scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being the state's most vulnerable communities. To map each project, we first had to identify which projects we could map and which projects we could not. For example, the Youth Opportunity Pass would not be included in this analysis as it's a region-wide program, despite providing free transit to youth across the region. Next, staff created a half-mile buffer around each project's location. The half-mile buffer measures each project's area of influence. In other words, most people who are found within a half-mile of a project will have the most access to it and are most likely to receive a project's benefits. The project location, along with its half-mile buffer, creates our total project area. Staff then overlaid each project's total project area with Kaalmada Luqadda 4.0. To the right is an example of a mapped bus route with its half-mile buffer overlaid with Kaalmada Luqadda. The percentage of a project's total area that fell within vulnerable communities, illustrated by the yellow through red shading, becomes our social equity multiplier. For instance, if 20% of a project's total area fell within this top 50%, then 20% would be our multiplier. The multiplier was then applied to a project's total cost within the 2025 RTIP 5-year period to determine its social equity investment. One key assumption of this methodology is that the proportion of a project that encompasses vulnerable communities equates to the proportion of dollars going towards them as well. For example, for that same project, if a project's multiplier is 20%, then the assumption is that 20% of its dollars are invested towards vulnerable communities. This process was repeated for every project we were able to map in GIS. Before I get into the results, I'll touch on some differences between the 2023 RTIP and their social equity analyses. In our first ever analysis, we were only able to map less than 40% of projects in the 2023 RTIP. For the 2025 analysis, staff was able to map more than 100 more projects, due in part to additional staff resources and follow up with partner agencies for better data collection. This round, staff also conducted an additional location-based analysis of project areas and low-income and minority populations, indicated by density that you can see on this map. However, there was not a separate dollar-based calculations for these populations, and these were reflected in new maps that you can also find in Appendix G. Here are the results of the 2025 RTIP social equity analysis. As a reminder, not all projects were mapped and included in the analysis. Hence, these percentages and dollar investments are only out of the projects we were able to map and not the RTIP in its entirety. Out of the 276 projects mapped, 89 of them had areas that intersected and fell within the most vulnerable communities in our region, or the top 25% of Kaalmada screen scores. Inclusive of the 89, 190 of them had project areas that intersected and fell within vulnerable communities, or the top 50% of Kaalmada screen scores. Under the assumption of the methodology, in total, $4.9 billion, or 38% of the total amount of all projects mapped, are going towards vulnerable communities. We recognize this is an evolving process, and we're continuing to learn as we conduct this analysis with the intention to refine our methodology. And I will now pass it on to Richard to touch on some of the limitations of our analysis.
Thanks, Kat. So yeah, there were some challenges in collecting the data for this analysis. There were certain projects that were unmappable, which I'll talk a little bit about in more detail on the next slide. And this kind of has to do with the type of project, the number of locations, and the frequency with which there are changes to the project or changes to the locations. Also incomplete information, generic information, or vague responses to the social equity questions that we have in our RTIP database, as well as resources and capacity, which is generally inconsistent across the different jurisdictions. So that can be a problem. So projects need to have a unique location assigned in order to be counted in this analysis. This slide here provides examples of projects which we might consider as contributing to social equity, but were not evaluated in this analysis for a variety of reasons. The RTIP does not contain data on the location of populations which utilize programs like the specialized transportation services, which serve the elderly and disabled, or the Youth Opportunity Pass, which is available to youth across the county. While projects like the Purple Line and Blue Line are expected to provide needed services to vulnerable populations, these projects are still conceptual and cannot be mapped until they are better defined. Flexible Fleets, a favorite project for social equity, is not in the RTIP. The money for that project has been provided already and the project is ongoing, but until it concludes and new projects are funded, Flexible Fleets will not be shown in the current RTIP. In short, the primary reasons for projects being deemed as unmappable are there's too many locations, or the locations change too frequently, either on an annual or biannual basis. Again, not enough resources or inconsistent capacity to collect shared data, and limited specific information regarding location or service area. As Kat mentioned, this is the second time that we've performed a social equity analysis on the RTIP, and we were able to make some improvements over the analysis that we performed on the 2023 RTIP. And we will continue to evolve and improve this analysis with each RTIP iteration. We currently have some ideas for how we can improve the analysis in the short term and in the long term. In the short term, we will continue researching our best practices, continue sharing local community engagement opportunities, as well as seeking RTIP software improvements. In the long term, we intend to explore an alternative agency-wide social equity index for future analyses and to provide technical assistance to local jurisdictions that will hopefully allow for better data collection and incorporate social equity criteria for Transnet funding allocation. We appreciate you giving us some of your time this morning. I want to remind everybody that tomorrow, September 27th, the board will be asked to adopt the final 2025 RTIP. And the final RTIP is due to the state by this coming Monday on September 30th. And then from October 1st to October 31st, the state will hold its public review period. And we expect federal approval of the 2025 RTIP sometime around or on December 16th of this year. And for more information on the 2025 RTIP, you can visit the RTIP webpage. A link has been provided here. And our emails have also been provided in case anyone would like to reach out to us directly. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you. All right. Any working group members have any additional comments or questions? And if you do, you can raise your hand. Yes, Kim.
Thank you very much. Just confirming, so public comment on this is closed. Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it closed. It went from July 31st to August 31st. And then we had the public hearing on September 20th.
Barry? Yeah.
Your mic, Barry.
Go back to the non-mapped slide for a second. So what's the impact if they're not mapped? And what kind of an, if any, effect it has on communities that are working in this with these projects?
Well, I think as Kat mentioned earlier in the presentation, the social equity analysis is really just a snapshot of where the funding that's programmed happens to be relative to the different communities and the projects that kind of intersect or like connect in those areas. When it comes to the, so I think that answers part of your question. These projects are basically projects that, again, they have like the specialized transportation grant program is a great example. Those projects have tons of locations, sometimes hundreds, and it's very hard resource-wise to map those or even capture all of those. And with every RTIP cycle, sometimes even, every 2 years or sometimes every year, those will change. And so we kind of just have to go off of whatever the current locations are for those or the conceptual locations. Does that answer your questions?
Can I jump in, Barry?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
It not being mapped just means we don't get to count it in the analysis.
Yes.
So
will that have any funding, potential funding?
there's no funding implications here. The funding has already been decided on, and we're just saying, okay, here's the funding. Now, this is where we are seeing the projects located. And again, it's just location based.
Gotcha.
So some of these, like the Youth Opportunity Pass, it's not accounted for in the analysis because you cannot put a location to it.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So we're just not able to assign credit, if you will, in the analysis.
Got it. Okay.
Regina?
Okay, can you guys hear me? I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you so much for the presentation. That kind of speaks to my question, which is, I think the aim of this study is that we would be able to then eventually tie it to these are communities that we should be targeting because they're underserved even within these projects. Am I wrong about that? There's a implication to see what communities are getting some of these services and how we can prioritize those, right? And I know that that's a long-term goal, but do you guys know, because I know it's only the second time you've done it, is there like a threshold? Is there a timeline of how many times we need to do this before we can really start to make sure that we have this data available and start using it as criteria?
I can't really speak to a precise timeline. And being the second time that we've done this, it's definitely still evolving and we're still trying to figure out the best way to do things. I can also say that we are one of only a handful of MPOs in the state that are currently doing an equity analysis on their RTIP or their transportation improvement program. It's not yet mandated by the state. We expect it will be at some point. But basically going forward, we've been thinking, especially with this particular iteration and the improvements to the number of projects we were able to map, we're constantly thinking of how we can simplify the process of getting the data and turning it into the analysis. And I have been kind of considering the idea that since we amend the RTIP every several months, that maybe we start requesting this information from the local jurisdictions at that time if they participate in an amendment. It's not mandatory that they do participate, but if they do, I think it's a great opportunity for us to get that data a little earlier and then, hopefully simplify the process of trying to do it every 2 years when we do the biannual RTIP update and get that information sooner. But we do plan to, with each RTIP, try to expand, the types of questions that we ask, try and like dig a little deeper. We are currently working with our consultant who provides our RTIP database called Project Track we're working on upgrading the platform to the newer version, and we're hoping that it will allow for us to expand the functionality that we have in there, where we have certain fields within each project to request and collect that information for the social equity impacts and any related data by project. And that's where I'm saying that I'm thinking that every 3 months when we do a quarterly amendment, we can have them provide any updates at that time, and then it will, limit, I guess, the amount that we have to go collect when we do the next 2-year update, if that makes sense.
I would also like to add that while this is sort of a retroactive analysis, once the programming has already been solidified, we hope that this can also be a tool for community members to catch the times when local jurisdictions are having public hearings to help determine which project should be prioritized. So if those are mapped out and you can see the maps of where these projects are, we're hoping that that can be a tool for accountability in the meantime. And to also kind of paint the picture of how we are trying to be a lot more comprehensive in the questions we ask, we added quantitative questions to help measure benefits and impacts. So one of them is how many housing units, businesses, jobs will be displaced either temporarily or permanently, and how many acres of parks, open space, and other public facilities will be converted for transportation uses. We got a few responses, but for the nature of some of these projects, like for example, roadway maintenance, streetlight repairs, there isn't necessarily an answer for that. And also, if something is in the planning stage, for example, which is why, as Richard mentioned, with each amendment, we're hoping that we can encourage our partner agencies to answer that once they get that information.
Carol? Thank you for this. I remember when you brought this to us the first time, and I was really excited to hear that you were doing this analysis. And I probably know the answer to this, but to confirm, this stays on the map or in the analysis until the project is complete, right?
What stays on the project?
Well, when you're showing all of the different projects going on around the region, it stays in the mapping until that project is complete? Because I know we have several in El Cajon going on right now that 4 or 5 years, so.
Right. Well, basically how it works is, so the RTIP shifts out 2 years, every 2 years, to look at a new 5-year period. So it kind of depends on whether you see a project or not, depends on when it's expected to complete. And so since we conduct the analysis every 2 years with the 2-year update, it's really just kind of a snapshot looking at the upcoming 5 years. So in this case, fiscal years 2025 through 2029. And so in 2026, this time that year, we'll be working on the social equity analysis for the 2027 RTIP, which will then be looking at fiscal years 2027 through 31. And so at that point, it'll be 2027 and 2028 that'll be kind of the primary years in there that we'll be looking at. So projects, they kind of come and go from the RTIP depending on local priorities. So like using City of El Cajon, I live out in that area, and I know that recently they did like some pavement resurfacing in my neighborhood. And those locations change usually year by year. And so that's kind of, getting into like the deficiency in the analysis is kind of, some of those projects were not really mappable. But yeah, it's kind of, you have to sort of, follow a project through its kind of life cycle. And that's kind of, the RTIP kind of is the final step to secure the funding for that. And so you can kind of see how it tracks through the different phases.
Yeah, I'd also like to add to that, yes, it will affect the mapping, but at the same time, there is all this nuance that Richard is hinting at as far as following a project, because just because something is finished doesn't mean that there's benefits in that area. So we're doing this every 2 years. So hopefully we will be able to align that with the project phasing and completion and implementation. And with the RTIP, you can also see and kind of deduce what phase it might be in as well. As far as construction, there might be more funding in that window as well.
Okay, thank you so much. And it is exciting to see projects going on with SANDAG signs on them around alcohol. So thank you.
Belen, sorry.
Thank you. Correct me if I'm phrasing the question incorrectly, but I'd like to hear more about what these percentages mean. 38% going into vulnerable communities, 6% going to most vulnerable. Are those really bad scores? Are they okay scores compared to population, or some other factor that you think is, allows us to assess impact?
At this point, the analysis, the methodology as it stands, we don't believe it's in a place to make a judgment per se until we've refined the methodology, especially when it comes to data collection. It would be a large sweeping statement to say that this is reflective of the RTIP. To answer your first question, or the first part of your question, what we did that, we found the multiplier of each project, and whatever dollar amount that was, let's say like 500,000, 2 million, we added that all together. And then divided that by the total project amount of what all these projects are. So it's just a proportion. I would say it's about 70% of the projects we were able to map. But we, at this point, don't find anything conclusive as far as determining what's good or bad. I think that's also, it's just information to look at this point, but that is something we are considering and trying to explore moving forward. But there isn't really a model for that. The small handful of MPOs that we've seen have done it as well, like retroactively, not necessarily having social equity criteria in determining the funding allocations. So we're looking at new models that are coming around, and we hope to get more guidance and maybe best practices from the federal DOT, because we do anticipate them requiring social equity analysis in the near future.
No, got it. Thank you. And so when is the next time you would start another social equity analysis on this, in 2 years?
Yeah, for the 2027 social equity analysis. But I also want to note that in between that period will be the time when community members can get engaged at their local jurisdiction level to help influence what projects get prioritized for funding allocations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jesse?
Yeah, so Belen actually asked my questions, but I also have another question. So I think how I'm seeing this social equity analysis, I think it's kind of like a supplemental, right, to like the RTIP. And you guys mentioned that you guys are planning on including something similar to other efforts that SANDAG is doing. So I think that's great. But I think it would also, in an ideal world, would be great if you guys could include some of the other projects, like the ones that are not be able to map. And I get that, right? Because it's kind of easy to like if it's mapped, you guys have like a boundary and it's like pretty straightforward to kind of like be able to quantify that. But I'm just wondering, and I know it might be like a hard question, but are there any kind of other MPOs that are looking into models or ways to be able to kind of quantify like all these other projects, right? The unmappable ones, because all of the ones that are listed on the presentation, that they have had a great impact and communities of concern. So I think it would be great if we can kind of like consider them as well. And I think too, they would really help the case, make the case to make some of them permanent, or allocate more funding, or expand it to other populations as well. So yeah, I guess my question is, do you guys know of any other MPOs? And I know this is kind of like pioneering work too, right, for SANDAG and MPOs.
What I can say is that, this is new to even the MPOs that we are kind of referenced or used as examples to kind of mimic to create our first social equity analysis with the 2023 RTIP last time around. They're still kind of working out the kinks in theirs as well, but I definitely will consider for the next iteration, ways that we can try to capture or show data or something that reflects those projects that are not included in the analysis, because we have a total of 395 projects in this 2025 RTIP. And I know here the 190 is inclusive of that 89, but that leaves, about 100 or so projects that we were unable to map, that it would be nice to show at least where those dollars are going.
Yeah, and to answer the second part of your question, or even the first part, we did look at the Atlanta Regional Commission, and they kind of do a binning system. So awarding points to specific sensitive populations or environmental factors and hotspots based on their agency-wide definition of a vulnerable community or a social equity community, whatever the equivalent is. We are using Kaalmada Screen 4.0, so that has its limitations as well. One of the things we are considering is exploring other indices. For example, the ETC, I think the Equitable Communities or Explorer or something like that, from the Justice 40 initiative from the Biden administration. And as far as tracking equity for projects and programs that aren't included in the analysis right now, including the YOP, for example, we know that projects and programs that are social equity oriented have their own ways of tracking equity. So I think that's something we can also provide context in. Instead of just saying this is included because of that, we can say this is how it's being tracked as a project, to just kind of paint the picture as well. And I think that's something we can include in the narrative moving forward.
Yes, Jovita?
Hi. You were saying that in the next 2 years that we can get the community engagement and them to be involved in the different projects. So I know there's a lot of projects going on, but I myself don't know where they are on the website. So it's like per region, are there different projects listed on the website that we can start letting the community know that they can get involved and have a voice? And then how to, because we want the steps to be able to tell them, okay, contact so-and-so, there's going to be a meeting here or whatever that situation is.
Sure. So basically, to answer the first part of your question, we have on our RTIP webpage, we have currently posted the proposed final version of the 2025 RTIP. And then tomorrow, once the board adopts the final RTIP, we'll replace that with the final. But the PDF has a number of chapters, and chapter 3, there's a couple others that show supporting project listings, but chapter 3 is the primary project listings chapter, and that shows all of the active projects for the 2025 RTIP. And what was I going to say? What's the second part of your question? Sorry. Oh, the opportunities for public involvement. So basically the way that it works is with every 2-year update, we do a public hearing on the overall RTIP program. And prior to inclusion of their projects in the program, jurisdictions will hold public hearings to get the buy-in from the community. Also with our quarterly RTIP amendments. So for example, we'll be opening up the first amendment cycle to the 2025 RTIP in October, which will then go to the SANDAG board for approval in January. It's usually about a 3 or 4 month time frame from opening to approval. And probably around November, any jurisdictions that are participating in that RTIP amendment, and by participating, I mean they're going to be updating funding, updating project information, locations, things like that. They will hold public hearings. And so that would be another time, if you had a particular jurisdiction where you were following certain projects, you could go and get involved there. And that's generally what we recommend, especially when it comes to the RTIP, because by the time things get to the RTIP, everything's pretty much baked in at that point. We can't add projects or update funding in the RTIP unless it's been approved in either a board action or, as I mentioned, approved via a public hearing at the jurisdictional level with a council resolution. So definitely the earlier you can get into and get involved, the better, and the more likely that your suggestions or your, influence will have a better result for you.
One more question. So when they have their public hearings, does a notice go out to the community, to business owners, to within?
At the jurisdictional level, they are required to provide notice of a public hearing.
Okay.
We do notice the public hearing for the RTIP every 2 years. So in this case, we noticed in several local publications that we were holding the public hearing at the September 20th Transportation Committee meeting. For amendments, we typically will send out a email to the local jurisdictions, the board members, also the agency staff. But I'm happy to, if it helps, work with our communications team to maybe send out a notice to let, other constituents know that we have amendment open where you could potentially, again, it's if the agency isn't participating in an amendment, then there won't be a hearing, there won't be projects included in that amendment. So it's kind of up to the agencies whether they want to participate or not. But I'm happy to work with our team internally to see if we can communicate better when we have an opportunity for projects to be updated, and then you can see if your agency is participating, and then in that case you can see if they have their hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Belen. And then Claire, do you have something too? Okay.
Okay, I'll be this. Props to you for including the hearing dates for the local jurisdiction, because it's always a hassle to try and find those dates. And I don't want to get too technical, but could it also include the contact info for the person in charge of that jurisdiction? And I think for our community members, so it would be helpful with some short video or something like that, explaining what you explained to us at the beginning of the presentation. This is what the RTIP is, so that people understand the difference between this and the regional plan at large and a whole bunch of other plans that we look at all the time. Thank you.
I appreciate that comment. That's one of our biggest struggles, is trying to make the distinction and keep it clear.
Thank you for this presentation. I think it speaks to staff, the fact that we're one of the few NPOs that's doing this work. So definitely appreciate that. And I know this has been, kind of stated, but just want to uplift again the importance that this should impact where funding goes. And so my understanding is that Transnet is the way that Transnet funding is allocated is at a jurisdiction level, and there would probably have to be like a ballot measure or something in order to shift. That could be a misunderstanding, but I guess I want to, if we're thinking about how long, the political process takes in order to change big decision or, big policies like this, if the next one is in 2 years, like we should be starting now in order to influence how this funding is allocated. And so I'm wondering if y'all can share, what sort of barriers there may be to having, social equity be a requirement in how funding is allocated, and then what we as a social equity group can do to, support that work, whether it's at the board level or in our own jurisdictions, with the public, et cetera. Maybe it's big.
Yeah, I would say that the best opportunities, since the RTIP it's based so much off of approved budget actions, approved board actions, approved jurisdictional actions and decisions. I would say, continue coming to the meetings here, the working groups here, go to the public hearings. And like you said, the earlier that you can get involved, the better. So like if you really want to see certain types of projects for the 2027 RTIP, I would suggest, getting involved at the city council hearings, and just even if you're, 2 years out from the next RTIP update, go ahead and start pushing for these projects, because I'm not sure how, each jurisdiction prioritizes their projects and determines which projects are going, every 2 years, we'll basically reach out to them and say, hey, we're doing a 2-year update. Can you tell us which projects you want to bring forward, basically keep them active for the next 5 years, and which ones can stay behind? It doesn't mean that they're being written off if they stay behind. It's just we try to keep only our projects with active funding in the 5 years in the current RTIP document for cleanliness, I guess you could say. So definitely encouraging your local jurisdictions to place more emphasis on certain projects and prioritize certain projects and types of projects is definitely the best way to go, because that will sort of trickle down to the RTIP and inform the RTIP. It is sort of a longer term, longer time frame that it will take for us to really see those results in the RTIP, because like I said, it relies on, an approved budget action and things like that. But if you keep pushing at, when they have budget items here going before the board, I think those are good times. Just kind of reminding everyone of the importance of the social equity and making sure that the funding is being allocated in a way that is equitable.
And in addition to transnet funding being in the RTIP, it also covers state and federal dollars as well, funding sources. So projects and funding sources have their own requirements for social equity. So it is one of our challenges to kind of encompass all of that at a regional level, just because they vary so much. And then on top of that, I think we might be able to have internal discussions about what it could look like, at least for transnet funding. But yeah, to encapsulate all of that, at that point, it might not be regional at that point, because it would be at least 300 projects to look at. But I can echo what Richard's saying, that at least on a regular basis, try to get involved in shaping the priority projects at the jurisdictional level. And I'll also add to that, on the topic of funding sources and different requirements for social equity. For example, one project might not even require, for example, a Title VI analysis, because their entire jurisdiction is a disadvantaged community as well. And each funding source may also have different indexes on how to define social equity, which then influences how they require it in their awarding.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. I think also, as we're thinking about long-term, is there are some communities that have no social equity implications, right? And so if we think about what, the definition of equity and like righting wrongs of the past, just for us to, keep thinking about how do we, what are we able to influence, moving forward, so that that we can continue to, right? The money is money's what makes it happen right now, at least. So just to continue to uplift that.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely noted.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, I'll turn to our clerk to see if we have any comments from the public.
Thank you, Chair. I do have 2 members of the public who would like to comment. Cesar Javier, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Blair Beekman.
Cesar Javier. Payback time, Uncle Sam. I say again, payback time, Uncle Sam. I have 5 lessons to present to you in 2 minutes. The strength of a chain is the weakest link. We have been implementing projects like this many years. Historically, the Trans-Pacific is one example. Did we have social equity to consider? It's something like modern planning and implementation, modern times. The goal of this is to save money. Spend it, optimize it, My question now is, have we saved money? And if so, where did it go? And how much did we waste? Third lesson, we can never defeat nature. But it is our intellectual power to protect human and the thing, our environment, our air, our water, our food, our community in terms of cleanliness and safetyness, if I may use those vocabularies. Number 4, please, let's identify, put distinction. Project A, Project B, Project C. Do not generalize 199 projects so we could monitor how much we have saved and how much did we waste. And finally, as much as we could, let us synergize.
And your time expired.
As many as now as participants.
Thank you. We'll move on to the final commenter on this item. Blair Beekman, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. It happened sometime. You offered your council committee comment before public comment, and I think public comment would have been a little more helpful to start and then go into your committee questions. It happened. Just thought I'd mention it. But thanks a lot for this item. I wasn't around for the public meeting process like I wish I was, but really important items. The future of addressing the air quality issues in the South Bay area is incredibly important. And with the flood issues that happened in 2024 January in San Diego, it hurt the process a lot. We've been trying to work on the Tijuana River Valley for decades now. And we have to really, in San Diego, be accountable in what happened around the flood issues. We have to be open and clear to people and apologize and just be willing to do those steps in order to talk about the future of, the Tijuana River Valley that we've been trying to address forever. And we're at a time that I think we're really starting to. And it's hopeful, the hopeful time. So good luck how we can be accountable with the flood issues. It would really help the process a lot. And I think you're trying to do that in SANDAG with your auditing efforts at this time, I've noticed. Thank you. So good luck to everyone. And with the issues of ride sharing, I think the social equity cooperative group can have a really important, they can be a good in-between in all the different groups are fighting over the future of ride sharing and really offer a good middle ground. That it's an important program for the future. There's United Taxi Union, there's worker cooperatives that can help the process and how to address.
And your time expired, and that concludes the public comments.
Okay, thank you. We will now move on to item 4, which is an overview of the Regional Priority Climate Action Plan and the development of the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. This overview will be presented by Natasha Dulick from SANDAG. So we'll pass it off to Natasha.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Natasha Dulick, and I'm an Associate Regional Planner here at SANDAG on our climate team. Here today to provide an overview of the Regional Climate Action Planning work that we've been doing here at SANDAG through an EPA grant. So I'll provide an overview of the grant, the deliverables that we've been working on, as well as some engagement and next steps. So an overview of the grant. So we received a planning grant from the EPA for $1 million through their Climate Pollution Reduction Program. And the grant consists of 3 different deliverables to be completed over 4 years. So the first deliverable was the Priority Climate Action Plan, or the PCAP, which maybe some of you are familiar with. We had come to this group in the past to present on the PCAP and seek input. So this was completed in March earlier of this year, and it consisted of near-term, implementation-ready, priority greenhouse gas reduction measures. And now that that's been completed, we're working on the next deliverable, which is the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, or the CCAP. And this is due next December of 2025 and considers significant GHG sources and sinks, and looks at near and long-term, so building off the PCAP, looking at long-term as well, GHG reduction goals and strategies. And we are doing this in coordination with the upcoming 2025 regional plan. And then the last deliverable is a status report, which pretty much is what it says it is. It's due at the end of the grant, and it's an updated look at our analysis and our plans, and looks at the progress we've made and all the next steps. Oh, okay. So a big focus of this grant and these climate action plans is prioritizing environmental justice communities here in the San Diego region, and making sure that we're getting out there, educating the communities, and creating equitable measures in these plans. So doing so through a number of ways, we have developed a community engagement plan to be implemented through our climate action plans through the CCAP. We have set aside funding for our CBO partners that are in our SANDAG CBO network to engage within their communities. We are continuing to seek input from this social equity working group regularly on our draft work. So as I mentioned, we did come to this group for our PCAP, and we'll be doing so throughout the life of the CCAP as well. And then we'll be including the community needs and analysis that we learn throughout engagement opportunities and rolling those into the climate action plans. So that's a look at the grant itself. Now I'll provide an update on the PCAP, which, like I said, was submitted, but in case some of you aren't familiar or if you weren't here last time. So the PCAP identified near-term priorities for reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. So kind of like a 5-year timeline. And it included 9 measures that address the largest emitting sectors in our region, which were transportation, energy, and buildings. And really wanted to target those because it was a shorter time frame. Those were the ones that were going to give us the most reductions. And under those measures, we had 22 actions that represented the vision for reducing climate pollution in the region. So an example, if you look at the transportation sector, we had measures looking to reduce transportation emissions by increasing public transit use. So one of the actions was continuing the funding for the Youth Opportunity Pass and those sorts of programs, as well as looking at providing EV incentive programs and prioritizing incentive programs in low-income and disadvantaged communities. So these measures and actions were all built on measures from local CAPs, our regional plan, and we saw a lot of input from local governments, agencies, tribal governments, environmental and community groups. This was a huge group effort, and we're really appreciative of everyone that provided input on the PCAP. Like I said, it was submitted and accepted by the EPA earlier this year in March. And a side note, we did apply for some funding through the same grant program through the EPA to implement some of the programs that were identified in the PCAP. Unfortunately, we did not receive funding. It was a super competitive grant program. Actually, only one agency in California got funded, but we will be seeking funding for these programs in the future. All right, so that's a look at the PCAP. Now we're going to move into the CCAP with the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, which is what we're currently working on. So the CCAP really looks to expand on the PCAP and identifies near and long-term priorities for reducing GHG emissions in the region all the way out through 2050. So the PCAP was through 2030. This is much further out, much longer vision. It includes a new regional greenhouse gas inventory that will be also used for the 2025 regional plan. And here's a key difference. It's considering regional measures across 7 different sectors. So for the PCAP, it was our top 3 highest emitters, but with this, we're looking at 7, which are transportation, electricity, industry, buildings, waste and materials management, natural and working lands, and agriculture. So we're adding a lot more in. Going to be needing a lot more input and technical expertise from those in the region. And yeah, we look forward to building out these measures. And this is due to the EPA next December, like I said, 2025. Okay, so I've thrown a lot of caps at you. There's local caps, there's a C cap. I think a great way to kind of determine and recognize the differences is to compare them to local caps, which is something that you guys might be familiar with if you've provided input on a local cap. So for a local cap, it's a single jurisdictional focused plan implemented by that local jurisdiction. Whereas our CCAP will be a long-term regional vision looking at combating climate change, and it's implemented through regional collaboration. So it's going to take the whole region. For a local CAP, it's adopted by city councils or the Board of Supervisors, whereas our regional CCAP is submitted to the EPA for approval through the grant program. And then local CCAP they address the causes of climate change through use of mitigation, and often are also including adaptation measures as well. For our CCAP, we're going to just focus on addressing the causes of climate change and provide mitigation. All right, so getting into the nitty-gritty of the CCAP. This is what we're currently working on, our draft measures right now. So quantifying GHG reduction measures, and we will be providing measures for each of those 7 sectors that I mentioned that are listed here on the left. And then for each measure, for each section or sector, we have to provide the information on the right. So quantified GHG reductions, identifying the authority to implement, implementation agents, so similar, very important. Estimating the cost of a measure or a program, providing an implementation schedule, identifying performance metrics, and then implementation milestones, and identifying the geographic location, whether it's a regional program or a more project-based, depends. So again, an example, the transportation measures, if we're looking at EV incentives as a action or strategy, we're going to have to provide all of this information on the right to support that measure. And then some other required elements of the CAP that are going into the plan. We have a benefits analysis. So this is looking at estimating the regional air pollutant reductions that are coming from these climate measures in the plan. We also have an environmental justice benefits analysis that's separate from that, which looks at the estimations of pollutant reductions and then identifies other benefits that can be provided through these measures to low-income and disadvantaged communities. And then we look at funding availability, so identifying federal, state, or local funding programs that might be available to implement each measure. And then lastly, workforce planning analysis, where we analyze potential workforce shortages and challenges that might come about from these measures, and then identify solutions and partners to overcome those challenges. Okay, so that's the details of the CCAP and what's going into it. As far as collaboration and outreach and engagement, we are doing so through a number of ways. First off, we are going to be continuing our climate tables. We started the climate table when we began the PCAP. We had 2 climate tables for the PCAP and found them to be very successful. So we will be hosting 3 total for the CCAP. We actually recently held one in July. So I'll be providing a little update on that in the next slide. But yeah, there'll be 2 more going forward. And then we will be sending out a regional survey to gather public feedback on greenhouse gas reduction measures, the draft measures that we're currently putting together. And then I mentioned earlier that we are contracting with some of the CBOs in the network for community outreach. So very excited about that. We currently have 2 signed on. And then other engagement methods are presenting to stakeholder groups, community events, and going to SANDAG working groups and committees such as yourselves. Okay, so like I mentioned, we just had pretty recently a climate table meeting in July where we had a great turnout. We had some great input that we received, thought it went really well. The way that it was broken down was we had breakout groups by sector. So those 7 sectors that I mentioned earlier, we split up into groups and just brainstormed near and long-term climate measures that could be included in the CCAP. And what we heard, just a recap, making sure to ensure programs meet the needs of environmental justice communities and that these measures are equitable, and thinking about populations like students and renters, because those are huge populations here in San Diego. Also, expanding incentives and building on existing programs that are currently working was a big topic. I think with that is making sure that the community is educated on these programs and they have the resources to act on these programs. And then from there, expanding those incentives for those that are working. And then lastly, of course, continued collaboration and coordination is key. So like I said, we'll be continuing this climate table program into the end of this year and next year, which brings me to my last slide on next steps. So going forward, we're going to be continuing seeking input from working groups this fall. We'll be hosting our 4th climate table in the winter, where we'll be sharing our draft list of the GHG reduction measures that we're currently working on to seek feedback on those. And then we'll be sending out that public survey that I mentioned this winter. And then looking into 2025, we'll be publishing our draft CCAP and hosting a 5th climate table in the summer to go over that draft. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for listening. I'm here today if you have any questions, or feel free to reach out whenever over email as well.
Great, thank you. Do any working group members have any comments or questions? And if so, please raise your hand. Go ahead, Claire.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. This is really, really important. I haven't quite formulated my question, but I'm wondering if a part of this process is thinking about, how we collectively address like the backlash from the oil and gas industry, especially in our environmental justice communities. And, oftentimes, or what we're seeing in National City is kind of like greenwashing happening to push forward, businesses that are like a part of the energy transition, but are still, contributing to high levels of GHG emissions. And so I'm just like kind of trying to think about how like that kind of thing that's happening at like a really, really local jurisdiction level can be addressed in something like this big regional climate plan, and how we can, make sure that we hold local jurisdictions accountable. And I think, that community members hold local jurisdictions accountable, but also what role does like a plan like this have in making sure that we're not like, there's not like still like holes open for, like the, sneaky business to come in and continue to like take us off track from our GHG goals, continuing to negatively impact environmental justice communities. And I can see how environmental justice communities can continue to be asked to bear the burden of like a transition, and wanting to make sure that that's recognized in the plan so that we're not continuing to be vulnerable to this. So I don't know if it's a question or more just like a comment on like awareness, because the backlash is happening, and like greenwashing is really powerful, and wanting to make sure our communities also understand like what sort of language we need to be watching out for, because there's sneaky tactics, and I think we also need to be aware as a social justice or social equity working group, so we can support communities. So maybe just a comment, but
thank you for your comment. Yeah, I think education is definitely key in getting out into the communities and making sure they're aware of like the talk and the language around climate action planning. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I'm going to turn to the clerk to see if we have any comments from the public.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 public commenters. Cesar Javier, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Blair Beekman. It looks like he has left, so I'll go ahead with Blair Beekman. Please go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks a lot for this item. Thanks a lot for the committee comment on the item. I think the proper procedure is clarifying questions from the committee after staff presentation, about the presentation, then public comment, then deeper questions by committee persons. So thank you for this item. Thanks. I'm trying to learn a lot about the environment. It's important, again, that if we're accountable with the future of the air quality issues for the Tijuana River Valley issues, to be accountable about the flood issues before and afterwards, it could just help the process tremendously. And that means apologizing, basically, and to be willing to be open about things before and after. With that said, I have a big issue that I hope this committee can help address about the future of environmental concerns with the future of train issues and going through, North County. The twin track issue has been a popular way to be addressing the issue, and that does address environmental concerns. I'm still concerned about the concepts of to make sure to try to have a light as footprint as possible in the area. And I know we're trying to haggle out best solutions for the area, but I think that those sort of words need to be clear, that we have to have a real focus on wanting to save the environment that we're just kind of taking for granted in our current conversations, I believe. I think personally, tracking in East County is important to put the future of train tracks and talk about that subject. But on the whole, I just wish when we talk about the North County issues and future of railroad tracks, that, we talk, to Orange and LA counties more, that is a more regular conversation, and we talk more about the environment itself. I hope you can facilitate that sort of conversation.
Your time expired. That concludes the public comments.
Okay, thank you. Well, we are moving on to the last part of our agenda, which is that our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, October 24th at 9:30 a.m. And if those are all the comments, I'm just going to make sure. Any other comments before we adjourn? Okay, seeing none. Thank you all for coming today, and we are adjourned at 10:56. Thank you.